that essentially has ripped us off so badly.
So, Dr. Faber, with the printing of money and this potential bailout plan that's being discussed, what we're really seeing seems to be a power struggle as to where the wealth will be shifted next. The wealth, we already know, we've heard in the news that $37 billion was received by Goldman Sachs and Merrill Lynch after the AIG bailout. So obviously the cronies in Washington are still bailing out the very large.
Yeah, of course. It's a scandal. It's an elite. It's a group of crooked people. They're worse than the mafia. The mafia takes a certain personal risk by maintaining their territory. But the government and these elites are the worst kind of scum. And I think the American people should realize that. Now, the politicians will, of course, say, oh, the bailout is necessary for the ordinary people and so forth. But that is not true. The ordinary people will not benefit an inch by the bailout. That I guarantee you. The beneficiary will be Wall Street and the politicians that are paid by Wall Street. Incidentally, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac paid very high contributions to Mr. Barack Obama as well.
Yeah, it's apparent that there's a lot of change that needs to occur. If you were crafting a solution for the current financial problems, what would that solution look like? Is that something that we can draft?
Well, the first thing I would do is fire Mr. Bernanke, fire Mr. Paulson, and actually get rid of most of the senators in the U.S. and congressmen. I think most of them are on the take, and they don't look after the interests of the people, but look after their own interests and their cronies. I mean, I'm all for democracy, but we don't have true democracy anymore. We have an elite. We have like a royal family, the Bushes and the Clintons, and they protect each other. And this is a bad system. And I'm not only condemning the U.S., other countries have similar problems. But I'd like to mention that in Europe, wealth inequality in most countries is much lower than in the United States. Education is also much better than in the United States. Healthcare is better than in the United States. A few years ago, I wrote a report entitled, Is America Going to Become a Banana Republic? One would have hoped 20 years ago that the Latin American countries would become more like America. But what has happened is that America has become more like the Latin American countries. And I think I've just been to Syria. It's a beautiful country, and you have in front of you the entire history of mankind, from the Hittites to the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Byzantine Empire, and so forth and so on. And every empire has eventually gone down, and everything was lost. I mean, the losses were huge. And flourishing cities are today deserted and so forth. I think that America is essentially on the way down. Certainly, relatively speaking, doesn't mean that it will go into oblivion tomorrow, but in China and in emerging economies, wealth has increased dramatically, partly because of the U.S. trade and current account deficit, and in the U.S., for the typical household, wealth and income hasn't gone up.
Well, Dr. Faber, we could continue to discuss, and there's certainly a number of things that we would love to discuss further with you in the future. Thank you for joining us today. We'd encourage our listeners again to visit Dr. Faber's website at gloomboomdoom.com and certainly look at his market commentary. It has been invaluable for us, very prescient insight, and I would say over the last year, Dr. Faber, you haven't missed hardly any of the major calls, whether it's stocks, bonds, currencies, commodities. You're taking a very historical approach and combine a good degree of fundamental and technical analysis for something that packs a significant punch and would be, I think, of great value to any of our listeners who want to stay ahead of the curve.
Well, don't exaggerate. I also have bad calls. But we live in very volatile times, and all I can recommend is we're like walking through a minefield. In this situation, the best is to be widely diversified and hope that only the one or the other mine goes off and that you only lose 10 or 20% of your money and that the rest is safe. But I think that in absence of knowing how the world will look like in 5 to 10 years' time, especially given the manipulation by the government, the best is a wide diversification of assets.
Thanks for joining us, Dr. Faber.
Thank you very much.
Well, once again, you've been listening to the McAlvany Weekly Commentary. I'm Kevin Orrick, along with David McAlvany, and our guest today, Dr. Marc Faber. You can join us at McAlvany.com, that's McAlvany.com, anytime, or you can call us at 800-525-9556. Thanks for joining us.
This has been the McAlvany Weekly Commentary. The views expressed should not be considered to be a solicitation or a recommendation for your investment portfolio. You should consult a professional financial advisor to assess your suitability for risk and investment. Join us again next week for a new edition of the McAlvany Weekly Commentary.